AJ, one of the things about fear, I've been looking at my own fears, is that I think I'm afraid to discover more about myself.
Yes.
And it's discovering what I've done and what could have been done, because I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And as I work through them, I find that I'm discovering more. And I think that that's what's stopping me, is that fear.
Mm-hmm. Many of us at the core level have a belief that we're horrible, right? So it's just like, I am a horrible person. Now, can you see that straight away, if I'm afraid of feeling that I am a horrible person, I will actually then usually get into anger every time somebody sort of implies or even suggests something that makes me feel horrible. So straight away I'll get into the anger. Because we have a core feeling that we are a horrible person inside of us, and that often comes from deep emotional projections from our family and in our childhood, right? And it also comes from a lot of belief. You see, but from the time you're born to the time you're 7, you're being barraged with all these adult suppression type emotions, but you have yet to actually have an intellect that's able to sort between the truth of them or the error of them. So what's actually happening with all of these emotions coming into your soul is they all feel true. So if somebody projects at you that you're a terrible person, in that particular moment, as a child, you will often feel that you are a terrible person. Does that make sense? Because there's no way of sorting out whether the person who's projecting it at you is right or wrong, and there's an automatic acceptance of these emotions. And so what happens to the child is the child automatically accepts the emotional projection from their environment, which then establishes a belief. Now, as an adult, the reason why that doesn't happen as an adult is after we release our child causal emotion, now the truth can enter us and we're able to discern the truth for ourselves. And that's a very, very different process than what the child is capable of doing. The child is not capable of discerning whether the big adult standing in front of them yelling and screaming is actually in the wrong. All the child does is this little child feels this big adult there yelling and screaming, saying that the child is wrong, and the child's going, I must be wrong, I must be wrong, I must be bad, I must be... Do you know what I mean? That's what the child is automatically doing, because there's no way for the child to determine any difference. This is why projection of emotions to children is so damaging, because it enters them as truth when it's not true at all, right? And so as it enters them, they then believe it, and we now grow up as an adult, but inside of ourselves we're carrying around all of these childhood emotions and beliefs that we still believe to be true. And this is where we need to allow ourselves to experience them. And so in the end, yes, many of us will have this feeling that we're horrible people, and the more truth that comes to us, the more horrible we feel about ourselves, until we have a big grief session about how horrible we are. And then when we go through that grief, we'll come out the other end and say, hey, I'm not that horrible after all. Do you know what I mean? Because once we release the grief of how horrible we are that has been projected on us by our environment, we're now able to receive the truth that actually God created us to be totally different to that. Right? And this is one reason why the persons who have done more damage to others have more of a difficult time on the divine love path. Because the more damage we've done to others, the more horrible we feel about ourselves. And then we want to prevent that feeling, and we fight against that feeling and resist that feeling. And God is, when you think about it, what God's trying to do in this whole process through the law of attraction is trying to expose this feeling within us at some point. And that's why some people need to be near the point of death before they'll feel these feelings. Whereas others don't need to be near the point of death before they'll grieve and feel those feelings. And the reason why we sometimes need to be even past the point of death and in the spirit world for 1,000 years before we feel those feelings is because we just don't want to feel what we feel about ourselves in the end. And if we can allow that feeling, which is the most powerful feelings to work your way through, I've found, what happens is that you're then in a state of real humility, and you can process through lots of emotion very rapidly like that. But it's very hard for us to get to that point because in the end, we just come face to face with the fact that we feel we're a horrible person. And the truth is that many of us have done horrible things, right? But even the bigger truth is many of us have done what we believed to be horrible things at the time, which weren't horrible at all. But our parents and our environment and everybody else said it was horrible. And we now believe them to be true too. So in the end, we do start to feel that we're a horrible person. It's not a divine truth, but it is a feeling that we have within ourselves. Now, what we often do in a New Age environment was we would say, no, that's not true. That's not true. Don't tell yourself those messages anymore. Change your mind. Change your thinking. What I'm saying is you won't change your thinking until this feeling releases from you. The thinking, I'm a horrible person, comes from the feeling, I'm a horrible person. And until that feeling exits through grief, you will believe that no matter what anybody tells you about yourself. So you can enter a loving relationship where the man just adores you and he thinks you're beautiful and he thinks you're wonderful and everything else. But while you feel you're horrible, you'll never believe him. And the same applies to your relationship with God, you see. While I feel I'm horrible, I'm never going to believe God's viewpoint of me. Can you see that? Because I have this belief that's saying, no, God, you're wrong. I'm actually horrible. Does that make sense? And while that feeling is in me, it's not my intellect. My intellect can be going, I'm a wonderful person. I'm a wonderful person. My intellect can be thinking. But at the same time, I could be feeling that I'm actually not inside of here. And it's the feeling that relates to God. So in my feelings, I could be projecting a God. I'm a horrible person. You're not able to love me because I'm a horrible person. And the truth is, you will not feel much of God's love while you'll feel you're a horrible person. So you need to feel it and release it. So experience the grief of it and release it. Now you are open to feeling love come from God, and you'll realise that if God loves you, you can't be as horrible as what you thought. Does that make sense?
So is it to the fear of being a horrible person is then to feel being horrible?
Yes. Let yourself feel that you're horrible. If that's what is there. If you're afraid of feeling it, feel it. Let yourself feel it. Right? When you feel it at the causal level, you will not live in it. There's a big difference between living in it and feeling it. Most of us are avoiding the feeling of it, and it's the process of avoiding the feeling of it that causes us to live in it. And what I mean by live in it is that what we do is we're afraid of feeling I'm a horrible person. So what we do now is every time something happens in my law of attraction that triggers this emotion that I'm a horrible person, I go into rage with the cause of that. So, some guy comes along and, he just projects at me sexually or something, and then when I start to talk to him about it, he gets angry with me and then walks off, right? And in that interaction, I'll feel I did something wrong. I'll feel I'm horrible, whatever, and I'll go into that emotion inside of myself and live in it. And by living in it, what we do is we go, oh, he treated me bad. He treated me terribly. What a F&A or whatever we might call him, right? And we might just swear and curse about him and get really upset. All we're doing right at that moment is living in the fear of the emotion he triggered in me. Does that make sense? And by living in the fear of the emotion he triggered in me, I'm not dealing with the emotion. All I'm probably going to do is get angry and upset, angry with myself, angry with him, whatever. But when I actually deal with the emotion, he felt I was a horrible person. Maybe I'm a horrible person, and go into that emotion. When I release that causally, in other words, trace it back eventually to how in my childhood I felt I was horrible, a horrible person, release that, that's when my law of attraction will change. So I'll get treated as if I'm horrible less. But not only that, that's when I will no longer have any fear about others' perceptions of me. No matter what they feel about me, I won't react. Does that make sense? So allow yourself to go into those terrible emotions about yourself. And they're going to come up naturally. Just let them come up naturally. You don't have to go searching for them. Your law of attraction will bring them to you. And the key is to go into them when they come up, you know. Go into them when the law of attraction brings them to you. Yeah.
Thank you.